Are you ready for me?
Yes, yes.
Yes? Okay, perfect. Um, yes, just a note about the slides. I have been over the past couple of years, I have been trying to be focused so much on having healing centered interactions and leaving technology to the side as much as possible. So when I give my presentations, I just try to have it be me talking to everybody. Um, I want to first start by honoring the land where I am speaking from today. I'm in Gilbert, Arizona, and I acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional lands of the Octum Okma people, the Pipash Maricopa peoples whose ancestors have cared for this land since time immemorial. The flowing waters of the Gila River and the Salt Rivers have long sustained their communities, the culture and the spiritual lifeways, as well as altered some of the culture and the lifeways. We honor the enduring presence of the indigenous peoples throughout the valley, including members of the Gila River Indian community and the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, who continue to steward the land, the water, and the stories of this region. May we walk with humility, remembering that this land holds memory, spirit, and wisdom far older than our own presence. And may our work and our words honor the resilience and the sacred connection of the original caretakers of this place. So, my name is Iya Affo, and I'm super grateful to be here with you guys today. I also want to honor the ancestors of my own lineage and the ancestors of each of your lineages who make it possible for us to be here together in community. The work that I do really focuses on helping individuals and communities reconnect with their ancestral wisdom through trauma informed and culturally rooted healing practices. So I'm really focused on how do we help to reconnect people, right? Regardless of where we come from or what our ethnicity is or where our people originate, but how do we help to reconnect people to our traditional and ancestral ways of being? When we think about some of these things, right, we talk about being trauma informed. And I always laugh and say, well, and when people say, well, what does it mean to be trauma informed or what is trauma informed? And I laugh and think, like, well, it's just being human again. It's going back to being human. And part of that is also, right, going back to some of our traditional ways of being and traditional ways of interacting with one another, in addition to using food as medicine and ritual as medicine and ceremony as medicine and whatever art that our people previously created, right? Whether it's pottery, whether it's metalwork, if we're farmers, if we come from agriculturalists, whatever our traditional ways of being, how do we help connect people back to that? Because there's absolutely healing in that. There's healing for the individual, there's healing for the community and the collective. Um, and the more we're able to heal as individuals and have these healing centered interactions with people that we encounter, the more that we create environments that can really sustain healing. And I think that's so much what all of this is about, right? When we talk about trauma and we talk about healing trauma, generational trauma, all of the things, it becomes how do we create an environment? How do we create community that supports sustaining wellness? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we continue to go on. My work um, weaves together neuroscience and somatics and spirituality, bridging the ancient traditions with modern understanding so that we can regulate and remember and reclaim our wholeness. as we do this work, and I specifically focus on trying to move technology out of it as much as possible, I want us to take a moment to do what I call get into coherence, right? Get into alignment, right? Our own physical alignment with the body, with the gut, the heart, and the brain, right? All becoming in alignment, as well as our own spiritual alignment, as well as alignment with one another. So there was a time when I would be listening to conferences and people would ask me to do exercises with them or breathing or something with them. And I used to get so frustrated with it. And I laugh about that a little bit now because I kind of get it better. So I'm asking you to do something that I would have poo pooed a long time ago, but I'm asking you to trust me and walk with me and let's do some of this together. So, the first thing I want us to do in order to get into coherence, we're going to do a breathing exercise so that we can welcome ourselves and really land in this space. So, I'm going to give you the instructions now, and then we'll go ahead and do it together. I'm going to have you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 6. And we're just going to do that a couple of times, and then I'll give you some more instructions. So if we would all please join together, and we're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Again, in through the nose for 4, hold for 4, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Exhaled. Bring into your consciousness someone or something that you deeply appreciate or that you have great love for. Now allow that warmth to really fill your chest. Open our eyes again and be present in our space together. I'm hoping that you were able to have that feeling, right? It's so hard to describe, but when we have taken a moment to breathe and then think about people or something that we deeply love or appreciate, it brings us into alignment, what we call coherence. And that's the work that we were just doing. Now, our gut, our heart, our brain are in alignment and we're together in the space. When we cohere, we can then connect better with each other. And it's all about connection, isn't it? At the base of the foundation of healing is connection, human connection, right? So when we're able to connect, we're then able to take action. And the action is big action. Our time together will really explore how trauma lives in the body, how resilience is also carried in the body, and how ancestral practices can guide us toward healing And my hope is that you leave today not only with some knowledge, but also with some practices that you can carry back into your own communities. So, trauma and the body. Trauma is not just something bad that happened, right? It's how the nervous system responded and how that experience was stored. So if we think about trauma, right, we have all of these definitions of trauma, but let's widen our lens and really think about trauma as something that causes us to be so overwhelmed that our nervous system responds to it. And then that situation, that incident, that series of incidents gets stored in the body. So the body, right, was built for survival, right? We have fight, flight, or freeze or fawn, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn that we've all heard of. And these are automatic, they're not conscious choices. So when experiences are overwhelming and unresolved, the body remembers by holding patterns of tension or hypervigilance, or the body collapses, the nervous system collapses altogether, and we're in that stuck, frozen, freeze mode. So, for many communities, and especially communities that have experienced displacement, in Indigenous communities and African communities, trauma is not only individual, but it's collective. And it's carried through colonization, enslavement, forced displacement, and cultural erasure. And that's what we call historical trauma, right? A wound that lives in both memory and biology. So, for example, a child may grow up flinching at loud noises because generations before their family learned that survival meant staying silent. Trauma teaches the body lessons that get passed from one generation to the next. Now, let's move to the nervous system as memory. The body doesn't just carry wounds, it carries memory. So I use the phrase bone memory to describe this. The bones in many traditions are considered the scrolls of the ancestors. The bones hold our marrow, which has our DNA, and this DNA and what's held in the DNA gets passed, right, from one generation to the next. Bone memory is a way of understanding how our bodies hold the stories of not only trauma, but of resilience and survival across generations. So, just as bones carry density and strength, they also carry memory. And so this is a lot of the work that I have started doing. I have a book that's coming out about bone mapping and how to start listening to the messages of the bones and what information the bones carry from our ancestors, right? We now know science has caught up with indigenous knowledge, and we now know that the body retains trauma, holds on to trauma all the way down to the epigenome of the DNA. So, bone memory is a way of really understanding how our bodies hold the stories and resilience of survival across generations. So, this means that our bodies may instinctively know how to endure, how to create, or protect, even without being consciously taught. So, it's a good time for us, right, to take a moment, even about ourselves, and think about what strengths do we carry that did not begin with us, right? What strength or what resilience do I have that didn't start with me? Maybe, it's my grandmother's presence. Maybe it's the community's creativity. This is bone memory, the wisdom that lives inside the body. So if we think about resilience as ancestral inheritance, right? Because trauma is passed from one generation to the next, but so is resilience. And sometimes we forget that it's not just the trauma that we can pass from one generation to the next for potentially 14 generations. But the beauty of all of this work really is that we can also carry benevolence and we can also carry resilience from one generation to the next on the epigenome of the DNA for potentially 14 generations. Our ancestors gave us more than wounds. They gave us music. They gave us prayer. They gave us ritual. They gave us foodways, laughter, and collective care that also is part of regulating our nervous system. So when we remember the music of the ancestors, when we perform ritual as our ancestors did, whether that's spiritual ritual or ritual in terms of ways of being and something routine that we're doing every day, all of these things contribute to regulating our nervous system and then healing that trauma that's inside the body. So, for example, song and chanting regulate breath and nervous system. Singing, and science has now taught us this, but singing, especially when we sing in community, is one of the most powerful things we can do for our nervous system. Surprising, right? We always think about, I love to give information and tools that somebody can use and have autonomy with, right? Like we don't have to depend on a provider because maybe everybody doesn't have access to a provider. Maybe provider is not the best way for us to heal some of the trauma, some of the things that we need to work on in our life. Maybe seeing a provider, maybe talk therapy isn't the best route for us. But we know that we have other ways of being that help the nervous system. And these are things that we can be incorporating into our day to day life. So, singing, very, very powerful, even if it's just singing by ourselves. And if you think about those times when you're driving in the car and you're singing to yourself, right? Or you're singing out loud, or you're in the shower and you're singing out loud, that feeling that you get, right? That feeling of safety, that feeling of regulation, that feeling of joy and happiness, all of that is impacting the nervous system and supporting our own healing. Dance, and especially dance in community, again, is another one of the most powerful things that we can do. And if we think about it, right, it's hard to find any tradition or culture that doesn't do some level of community dancing, right? We have in African communities, we have indigenous communities, we have line dancing, right? That's very popular in places like Texas, right? We do line dancing. When I lived in China, they did line dancing. When I lived in India, they did another type of community dancing, right? Community dancing is everywhere. And that's because ancestors knew how to regulate the nervous system. They didn't always call it that, right? But they knew what needed to be done in order for us to be held in healing. Food and herbal traditions nourish the gut brain connection. We don't have a lot of time to go into that today, but one of the exercises that we did, the breathing that we did, was meant to connect the gut and the brain, because the gut is, like they call the mini brain, right? Because the two are so important for the two of them to be in alignment, and food and herbal traditions support that. Community ritual restores belonging. And at the foundation of healing is our interconnectedness and relationships, right? Any of our trauma greats, Dr. Bruce Perry, any of our trauma greats will talk about the connection between human beings, our interconnectedness as a better predictor of our health than adversity, because that's how important relationships and belonging becomes. So when we're able to do community rituals or do things together as a community, that restores those relationships and belongings. That helps to regulate the nervous system and stimulate healing. In many African traditions and indigenous traditions, drumming circles are not just music, but they're medicine. The rhythm entrains the nervous system, right? Syncing the heartbeat and breath, reminding people that they are not alone. Not all communities are impacted equally, right? Colonization and systemic racism, poverty and displacement really do intensify trauma. So healing spaces must be equity centered, meaning we don't assume that one size fits all solutions, but we honor culture and ancestral knowledge. And so here are three important principles of equity centered healing. Representation matters. So we invite cultural healers, we invite cultural leaders, we invite elders into our healing spaces. Honor language. People should be able to name their experiences in the words of their culture. I spoke at a conference in Kenya about 3 years ago, and I'll speak again next month. But it was unbelievable. We had 600 women from 55 different countries, all different languages, different cultures. And guess what? Every person was able, so we brought all the women in for healing. And so we held conferences and opportunities for healing. And every single one of those women were able to tell their story in their language. So, whatever their language was, there was somebody that would interpret it into the five major European languages. And then we could all listen to that story in our language. So, every woman got to tell her story in her own language, and it was profoundly powerful. Third, we need to value ritual, right? Healing does not always look clinical. It may look like drumming or prayer or storytelling or food or singing or dance or any of those things. So, if we think about a practice that you can use, try opening or closing group, right? You have a group session or you have a meeting, try opening or closing it with rhythm, even just clapping together or humming together, because the body feels rhythm as safety. When you pair that together with a cultural practice, such as a proverb or a song from childhood or a moment of silence for ancestors, you bridge the nervous system with cultural memory. And this is integration. And that's really what we're trying to do with trauma. We're trying to integrate it into our life, right? We're not really healing it, but we're trying to integrate it. So here are three takeaways that you could do immediately, right? Start with regulation. Begin meetings or sessions with breath, with rhythm or grounding exercise, because this helps people arrive in their body and regulate the nervous system. Next, we can honor story and lineage. Ask participants, what do you carry with you when you walk into this space? Invite them to name ancestors and mentors or family who shaped them and contributed to who they are. Create cultural spaces of belonging, right? We can welcome food and music and ritual and art into healing spaces. And then here are a few reflective practices that you can bring to work. Begin with one regulation practice, breath, right? Or movement. Invite participants to share story or song or proverb or something from their own lineage that gives them strength. And you can ask reflective questions like, what practice did your ancestors use for healing? Or what cultural ritual or tradition still brings you comfort today? Right? So we're bridging again the nervous system with cultural ways of being. So as we close, I really invite you to reflect on one practice from your own culture, family, or ancestors that you can reclaim as healing. It doesn't have to be big. It could be a lullaby, it could be food, prayer, or gesture. But remembering that all of these things that are part of our day to day life or were part of our ancestors' day to day life um, hold us in healing and hold us in having those healing centered interactions. And the more healing centered interactions we have, the more we are able to become a self healing community. The body remembers, right? It remembers pain, but it also remembers how to heal. So, our task really is to reconnect with the wisdom already carried within us and honor the ancestors who made this resilience possible. So, I will end here. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me, and thank you for inviting me.